All right, welcome everyone to the process of fertilization. That is what we're going to go over today. So, fertilization happens right after an ovum is released, which is called ovulation. It is swept up by the fimbriae. So this is this is the background, the context how fertilization happens. So ovum released, that's called ovulation again. And then it's swept up by fimbriae. Fimbriae are the tentacle-like things at the end of uterine tubes, the distal end, by fimbriae. And so these fimbriae take the ovum, kind of sweep them into the uterine tubes, the fallopian tubes. I think there's another name for them, but they all mean the same thing. And that is when the ovum is in the ampulla. It goes through the isthmus, which is like the neck of the uterine tube, and kind of stays there in the ampulla. That's where it is then fertilized. We'll get to that. So it's usually fertilized in the ampulla. Ampulla of uterine tube. Okay, that's where fertilization usually happens. Now, remember, before any fertilization has to happen, obviously, you have to have sperm and have to have the ovum. The sperm has to go through something called capacitance. So we're going to put that in here, capacitance. What does that mean? Capacitance is simply just the sperm. I think it's a process that takes around 7 hours, but it's functionally changing to where it can actually bind to the ovum and get into the ovum to fertilize the ovum. So that functional change, those functional changes, that happens in about 7 hours, and then the egg can be fertilized. So that, once again, that's for sperm. But then after that happens, then we finally have the sperm going into the ovum, going into the egg, and fertilizing it. How does that happen? So that process happens in 4 steps. And remember, the sperm actually gets to the egg. How does it do that? When during intercourse, sperm goes up through the uterus, goes into the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes, using a flagellum at the end that's powered by a lot of mitochondria, by the kind of middle portion. And then they have a head with all the DNA and also with an acrosome, which we'll get to in a second. So sperm travels to the ovum, and remember, ampulla is where it's fertilized. So as it gets there, then it has to go through corona radiata first. Travels to ovum, and we'll put a colon, semicolon there, and then gets past corona radiata. Those are just kind of the outermost layer of cells, if you will, for the ovum. Corona radiata. Okay, what's next? So then the ZP3 receptor, which I'll put over here, ZP refers to zona pellucida. Zona pellucida is just a membrane-like thing on the outside of the ovum, and that's what the sperm has to penetrate, also the plasma membrane, to get to the DNA, the DNA substance of the ovum, in order to complete metaphase 2 of meiosis and then form a zygote. So the ZP3 receptor of the ovum binds to the sperm head. To the sperm head. And so when that happens, when it's through the corona radiata, it's bound to the zona pellucida. What happens next? There's 2 reactions. There's one, the acrosomal reaction, and cortical. We'll go through those in a second, but what do these mean? These are also known as fast block and slow block reactions. Why they're called that? That refers to the polyspermy effect. So polyspermy meaning poly, a lot of, or multiple, and spermy, sperm. We obviously don't want a fertilized ovum to get fertilized again. Like it's already been fertilized, it already has one sperm inside it. So we don't want another sperm to get into that egg. So we need a mechanism that blocks it, and that's what these fast block and slow block against polyspermy does. So through the acrosomal reaction, remember the sperm head is bound to the zona pellucida 3 receptor. What the acrosome is Acrosome is a part of the sperm. It's near the head, the very tip. It has a bunch of enzymes that chart a path right through the zona pellucida. So enzymes are released. Enzymes break through the ZP, break through the zona pellucida. What this causes, and this is why it's fast block, this causes depolarization of the zona pellucida. Polarization of the zona pellucida. And this depolarization prevents any other sperm getting inside it. Now that's the fast block, happens within about 0.1 second. Now, because it's fast. This is the slow block, which kind of seals the deal, if you will. This is the cortical reaction. What happens here is this depolarization then causes intracellular calcium to exocytose. Here, we're gonna draw some arrows here. Exocytose some molecules that are inside the ovum, and those are gonna harden. Now I'll move sides over here. They're gonna harden the ZP all the way around. And this hardened ZP is the final deal. Nothing's getting through that, so it cannot be fertilized again. Polyspermy out of the picture. We're good. So that's the cortical reaction. We're going back here, and after this is the sperm is through the zona pellucida. It is through the plasma membrane, and finally through the plasma or the cytosol, if you will, and then it interacts with the ovum, with the female DNA, and that's when the egg is fertilized. Now, just a last quick thing here, twinning can also happen in the process of fertilization. And it can either be, you've heard, it can either be fraternal or identical. So fraternal or identical. Now, fraternal twins are a result from two separate ova, is the plural of ovum, two separate ova being fertilized by two separate sperms. So they're pretty similar, however, they have a lot of differences. The identical twins, that's when it's the same ovum and the same sperm, but they just kind of split in early development. And that's why they're so super similar. So this is the process of fertilization. Remember, we start after ovulation, we're swept up by the fimbriae, we go into the isthmus and then to the ampulla, the uterine or fallopian tubes. That's where fertilization occurs. Sperm, after it goes through capacitance, allowing it to be able to fertilize the ovum, then goes through these four processes, gets past the corona radiata, then binds to the zona pellucida through the acrosomal enzymes, break through, causing the depolarization of the zona pellucida, which does a fast block to polyspermy, so no sperm is getting past that point. Then the cortical reaction kind of seals the deal with the release of calcium that causes excitosis of molecules that harden the zona pellucida, sealing the deal for sure. And finally, that's a quick little explanation. That's twinning. Can be fraternal or identical, but that is kind of a result of fertilization. And that is the process. Thank you.